First, I want to apologize up front for my voice. I live in one of those American pocket dimensions where temperature consistency is made up, and the other day it just decided to stop being summer all at once. The result has been a minor antihistamine addiction and an ongoing losing battle with snot bubbles. I think I am on the upswing now, at least, but I hope you will forgive the scripting, which I'm kind of raw dogging, the audio, and the only tangentially related B roll in this video. I'm kind of doing all of this right now, feeling at about 65% or so. Second, I know not everyone hates the gi, least of all me, but I'm playing the hyperbolic YouTube game here. Even so, I do think we've really seen the pendulum swing to favor no-gi practice in recent years. So why is that? I think one reason, which I haven't really seen anyone articulate very well anywhere else, is that garment or jacket martial arts don't really have a huge cultural footprint in the English-speaking world. Sure, there are some jacket traditions that come out of England and Europe, but let's be honest, these are either extremely obscure or outright extinct. They certainly aren't going to come up when you mention grappling to basically anyone. In the English-speaking world, grappling basically is wrestling, period. Even BJJ in recent years seems incapable of resisting gravitating more and more towards wrestling. Now, there isn't anything wrong with that, of course. I empathize with the cultural predisposition to think that wrestling is the icon of grappling. Familiarity bias is absolutely a real thing, and wrestling is a fantastic and legitimate martial art. However, I think a lot of people these days are pointlessly suspicious of particularly Asian martial arts. The following is all my own speculation and my speculation alone, but I believe this suspicion is rooted in a few different sources. First, in the 70s up until about the 90s, there was a huge boom in Asian martial arts in America, maybe too large a boom in retrospect. Even today, talking to a lot of older folks, I think a lot of Western ideals got mixed in with the Eastern aesthetic. Although much was genuinely imported, it seems like a lot of the finer points were equally misunderstood. Sometimes they were even purposefully corrupted by fraudsters, looking to use the marketability of the Asian aesthetic to appeal for a cheap buck while teaching people made-up garbage. For a lot of people, Asian martial arts that aren't called Muay Thai or Judo might as well be McDojo factories. Second, accessibility to Asian martial arts is actually pretty low compared to wrestling, boxing, and the like, especially quality instruction. And by accessibility, I mean mostly in America. Third, and this is really truly just speculation on my part, but it is a correlation that I think I've noticed. As geopolitical tensions heat up between China and the US, it seems like ragging on Asia at large has become more and more common in the American cultural zeitgeist. Not exactly a great look for a country whose voters can't even seem to locate Taiwan on a map, but okay, sure. And maybe I'm overly reading into all of that, but at least in my own anecdotal experience, there does seem to be an increasing suspicion towards Asian martial arts, and a lot of jacket martial arts that we appreciate today, at least the most popular ones, do come from East Asia. In my experience, judo fares a lot better in these kinds of discussions than other gi arts, but even in recent years I've been seeing more and more about how judo only works against judo or whatever other stupid statements. My experience having a training partner actually say something like this to me inspired one of my videos a while back because it was just so baffling to me. There is truth that a lot of McDojos use Asian martial arts as a convenient cover for their scam. We could argue that maybe the Asian martial arts should do a better job of trying to vet themselves, but personally I think there will always be McDojos. Going on a crusade to snuff them out might be well-intentioned, and it might make for some great content like on the McDojo Life channel. but I also firmly believe that it is a forever war. On the flip side, I think a lot of this is a symptom of English speakers, particularly Americans, needing to get out a bit more. It's easy to forget that judo, a gi art, is, by participation at least, the most popular Olympic grappling sport. Moreover, globally, jacket grappling is just about as popular as no-gi systems are. The no-gi grappling is grappling perspective is really only sustainable if you live purely in the American, English-speaking driven combat sport bubble. The second reason I think the gi gets so much criticism is that it gets associated with stalling, particularly in BJJ. But, and this is the part of the video where I get to irritate BJJ folks, I think BJJ in general has a pretty bad stalling problem anyhow, completely irrespective of the gi's involvement. The whole ethos of the art at this point seems to be mostly about grinding down your opponent over a long match, and then once his gas tank is empty, you just submit him. I understand that people like Danaher and Gordon Ryan view this as the pinnacle of the sport, but I just don't agree on this particular point. I acknowledge that there is technique in that strategy, and it's an immense athletic feat. But at the same time, we might as well have two athletes run a marathon and then grapple at the very end. The race would be a far more entertaining way of watching two dudes try to win a war of attrition. In truth, the gi totally facilitates this style of play. I understand that the gi is mostly within the realm of the IBJJF, but I still think the general ethos is the same. Stall until someone gets gassed out or makes a crucial mistake. To me, the blame is getting unfairly shifted to the gi, when the real issue should be why can't the best grapplers in the world apply their craft in a timely manner? To me, personally, a 45-second submission is a far better expression of dominance, gi or no gi. Third reason, which is maybe a bit related to the first now that I'm thinking about it, is that the gi feels very unintuitive to beginners. If you are a beginner in no-gi, you can come into a class and scramble and muscle crap and generally be pretty scrappy. Now, you're probably awful and wasting a lot of energy on very dumb, wasteful movements, but it feels like you're putting up some kind of a fight. This is especially true for younger athletic dudes who come into a grappling art and all they really have to their name is athleticism and youth. Meanwhile, in the gi, it doesn't take too much of a skill gap to be able to shut down a lot of athletic guys who don't know what they're doing. When you don't know how to use the gi, it feels like you just can't do anything at all, and it's often demoralizing for beginners. Even in judo stand-up, I've often heard that this or that feels cheap because it uses the lapel or the sleeves or whatever. To me, this is some serious copium, but I can at least understand this sentiment. Not to mention that, and I'm just going to be brutally honest here, the people who pick up a martial art and the people who like studying are usually two totally different groups of people. The gi requires at least a little bit of studiousness to understand. Meanwhile, no-gi absolutely has a high skill ceiling, but its skill floor is much lower and therefore much more accessible. If you can figure out a collar tie, an overhook, an underhook, and a front headlock, then at least positionally speaking, you could easily go on and make a whole career out of that. You're pretty much set. Meanwhile, I'd have to make a huge Excel sheet for all the gi grips and guards. The second you tell Chadius the frat dude gym bro that he's going to have to activate his hippocampus is often the second that he switches to a no-gi class. And yes, this is totally a generalized caricature. There are tons of smart people in BJJ. In some ways, there are more smart people in BJJ than in other arts. But I've found that a lot of at least my own BJJ experiences were populated by dudes who just wanted to lift weights and smash and rolls, which is totally fine. No gi can fulfill that, but it doesn't mean gi is somehow bad or cheap or illegitimate by comparison. Finally, and this one is my biggest pet peeve, the whole gi isn't good for self-defense argument. So here's the thing about this, right? If you're training for self defense, you should really be training in street clothes anyway. Not in a gi, not in a rash guard, in street clothes, because it really is different. Street clothes might offer weaker grips than the gi does, but there are still grips that can be manipulated, exploited, and abused. On the actual mats, though, I've noticed that this is less of an argument and more of an excuse. It often comes up right after you manage to get something on someone, I've noticed. The other night, I was working with a guy in the clinch. Dude trains hard. I actually really like this guy. But I grabbed his belt and used it as a fulcrum. I was able to pull him in close and then wrench off one of his arms by twisting my own arm using the base that the belt was supplying me with. I'm not explaining it super well, but just know that it was a belt assisted clinch escape. The second I freed myself, my partner was like, "Well, I won't always have a belt." And my response, as it always is to these comments, is, "Well, but you have one on now." I have seen this whole gi won't be good for self defense thing brought up mostly when people have fallen victim to a gi assisted technique. High level pro tip for you here if you've ever done this. Just say, "That was a good one. I need to learn how to defend against that better." Because putting the blame on the gi just makes it sound like you're whining about losing. Sort of like taking a basketball shot, missing, and then blaming it on the sun being in your eyes rather than your own lack of skill or awareness of where the sun was at. If we are working in a gi, then using the gi in any way that you see fit is always legitimate unless otherwise stipulated by the rule set. It may be annoying. It may feel bad, but just be an adult and understand that it wasn't a gimmick. You just didn't know how to counter the thing. Also worth pointing out here briefly that the whole judo only works in a gi shit is absolutely hilariously bogus. When I say something like "that person doesn't know what they're talking about" online, I'm usually being hyperbolic for emphasis. Usually they do have some idea of what they're saying, and they're not totally blind to the topic at hand. When someone says judo takedowns don't work in nogi, I literally mean that they don't know what they are talking about. Like, this must be a day 2 grappler. Outside of Sode Tsurikomi Gosh, which is somewhat debatable, but let's just remove it for the sake of argument, and Tomoe Nage, which I find a lot less debatable, the range of nogi always turns a Tomoe into a Sumigaishi. Every other judo throw can be applied in no-gi. This is easily testable. It takes like 5 minutes. Take an overhook, underhook, or front headlock. I guarantee you can pretty much apply the whole judo curriculum from one of those 3 positions, sometimes all 3 of those positions. You get even more options when you do things like a head-shoulder clinch or a Russian 2-on-1. Now, if you want to say that the skill level of the average judo or BJJ person to apply judo techniques in no-gi isn't very high, then that's a bit more factual. The reason being that most judoka could just care less about no-gi, and therefore there isn't a clear avenue for judo to migrate into MMA or no-gi BJJ unless that person already has a lot of judo experience and is willing to put in the time to adapt their techniques to the no-gi context. There is more accessible talent coming out of wrestling for no-gi than judo. That's just how it is. But really, that just is the whole dang theme of this video, isn't it? Just because you don't understand something well, or it's unfamiliar or less accessible, doesn't mean it's illegitimate or a gimmick or bad. You just don't understand it, and that isn't a crime. If you want to understand it, then go out and find a teacher. If you don't care, then keep doing no-gi. Just please don't post a whiny Reddit thread about the superiority of no-gi just to feel validated about your own time investments and what you choose to train in. I grew up on the internet, so it's nothing new to me when I see that junk, but it screams edgy 15-year-old take to me. And much to my dismay, these opinions have and are going to continue, I'm sure, to come out of the mouths of 30-something-year-old men in my own training sessions, which I really don't like hearing. It just kills the vibe, man. It's kind of concerning, honestly. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. Hopefully, next time I'll not be drowning in my own boogers and my recordings will be more up to snuff. I will see you then, and as always, thank you so much for watching.